Wade, thank you very much for hosting us on this documentary. This is Wade Bennett, and he's a native here of New Mexico. And you're going to be seeing more of him because I think he's going to be good enough that he's going to show us some more locations that he's found. Thank you for your interest, Wade, in the artifacts and so forth in our heritage.
Well, you're welcome, Dr. Murray. It was nice meeting you, and I really learned a lot.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I appreciate that beautiful album of some of the pictographs and so forth that you've found in the area, and I look forward to seeing some of them. Thanks for having us.
I do too. Thank you.
We note here, if you note, a volcano-looking mound. Of course, it's grass mounded there with a tree right in the center of it at this time. Probably made there by the Mescalero, the basket weavers, or even maybe as late as the Apache. But most likely the basket weavers. What do we have here, Wade?
It's a mescal pit where they cooked the mescal and soto. The Apaches or the basket maker people.
Now, they cooked, what was it they cooked here?
Mescal or agave, century plant. That was their staple food.
Like for bread or a meal?
No, it was kind of like sweet potatoes. They cooked it in a pit fire and buried it like some people cook goats today. And they buried it and let it cook for several days, and they dug it back up and ate it, but they say it tasted like sweet potatoes.
Like sweet potatoes, wow. So what you really got is a huge oven. Yeah. And it would still work to this day, I'll bet. Here we have a good example of some iron oxide or red ochre. Difficult to make out. We have dots in line here. I think that's probably more a tally or a hunting boundary. And the reason I come to that conclusion is we have a turkey track right here. And with the turkey track here, very dim, and half a turkey track, and here an unusual character, and then what would again seem to be a tally, because you have 1, 2, 3, 4 short stems, and then a long series of, I say stems, and I mean lines, which is probably a tally or a date marker for someone. Very interesting. And immediately below this, we have some absolute ancient ogham, which was left around the country by Celts. And the gentleman that made this, it was a seasonal thing. The date would be somewhere between 600 and 800 AD, and as much as it is valveless ogham. And translating, beginning here, he gives his name. His name is Neil, or it could be Oneill. And then running to here, it states that there is a sighting, or that he is a designer or an illuminator. In other words, he has designed, if you would, a seasonal map, or a seasonal calendar, better said. So let's translate the entire thing then. And we have the man's name, Oneill, and he has the ability to design the illumination through the entrance gives the winter season. The sun's illumination through entrance gives the winter season. Now, I believe that actually the Ogham is a little clearer than that. It can even be September or October. So there we're talking about the autumn equinox. And this will be checked out and documented, and this will be watched next autumn when that time runs by again. What an interesting panel that again we find a man's name, Oneill, that traveled through this area at that period of time.
That part of this stone is falling out. And but here we have red ochre again. And real sad, but part of the stone is fallen away here. I don't see it in the general area. But again, I think it's probably a tally. A tally could be a date, that how long they'd been here, or a season. Or it could even be hunting boundary. In other words, from here on I claim this is a hunting area by the American Indian. I do not believe that is Ogham, but it's difficult to be certain with part of it having fallen away. This is one time we might say that time itself has a way of damaging historical or ancient artifacts or markings or signs. So it's really good that all the young people, old people, people alike, that you're out in the country and you see red ochre, Ogham, any type of ancient writing, pictograph, that you protect it, that you take care of it. This is our heritage. Of course, this was not done by man. This broke away with natural age and deterioration.
This spot here is where an archaeologist uncovered a skeleton that was supposedly dated back 9,000 years.
9,000 years, that goes back. Well, it's a possibility. And it's at a university at this time. We'll move up and show you a little better look here at the grave site. This lets us know that we never can be sure who the travelers were along the waterways of America. And we're in a feeder that feeds to the Rio Grande, which comes from the Gulf of Mexico, which feeds the world. So we're on, you might say, international highways here in the times of old. And certainly there's a lot man does not know about the ancient travelers, but we're getting there, and I find it quite interesting. And here we have a water sign in iron oxide or red ochre, and actually this was utilized along the Rio Grande and the feeder lines up and down throughout Texas and New Mexico as a sign of water. It was used by the American Indian as well as the ancient Hebrew letter Mem, which looks much like, could resemble or does resemble, speaking of ancient Hebrew, the water sign, and like waves. And that's what we have here. And of course there is water here at this time, and probably was at that time, and it was an indication that if this should be dry, the next time they come by, this might be a water hole. Water naturally meant life, and this area, and it still does. You must have water wherever you are to survive. You can go without food several days, but water's a necessity. We have a zigzag pattern here, which is amazing. We're not that far from the branch that would go into areas we have found Iberian, and interesting in as much as a skeletal remains was found in this vicinity. I think there would be no connection between that. But at one time was a beautiful red ochre zigzag pattern, akin to, but rarely do you see the Iberian. At least this is the first we've seen of it at this site, that there might be something that they had left. So we'd have to count it most likely as American Indian. And then a much more recent, but yet at the same time a much more protected, another turkey track, which would probably be directional. Okay, and here we're moving along, and you see a long shot of the cave itself and where the circle is, it's encircling what I will call the shoulder, the part of a man, the shoulder, where the light would shine through into this cave and illuminate the calendar on actually the ceiling, which is a little unusual, but nevertheless giving the date from the ceiling. What a fantastic area. And here we have the panel that that will declare a further message concerning this particular thing, and I find it really fascinating. Again, we have Oneill's name. He seemed to want it known that certainly it was he that traveled this area. And there we have the N, the first letter in the name Oneill, and then you're going to have those two strokes below the stem line, and this happens to be stemless Ogham. So we have his name Oneill that comes forth there. And then he's going to give us a subject here. He gives us an M, and then he's going to give us an H or a CH, spelled M-A-C-H-A, and it means field or plain. You can have a choice, but we'll call it a field. And he continues on through. We have a G, and then we look there, and 3 strokes is an N, and then we will have another M, and we got to add a vowel, which will give us the word G-N-I-M, and it means a 12th part of a plow land of land. Now this is interesting, that this measurement in the Celtic language, 12th part of a plow right. Now, a plow land, that is to say. Could it go all the way back to the time of the tribes when the land was allotted? The reason it's called the 12th part is that always all 12 tribes had a part in the lots cast for land, or when land was laid out. It's where our term city lot comes from today. And so I find that really fascinating that we see that old carryover from the 10 tribes, that they would still have that measurement, a 12th part. But then we'll get back to the pictograph there, the panel rather, and we see that he claims this 12th part of plow land of land, but he's going to do it. We see an H, which there was not numbers or numerics in Ogham, and H means 5, okay? The H means 5, and so he's taking the 12th part of plow land 5 times, which means he wants enough for 5 tribes, or he loves the number grace, which is what 5 also means. Now, as we continue on, we have an interesting word, G, which means sea, like the ocean. Now this is interesting, is it not? We're going to have to grab us another word or two before we're going to be able to understand how the sea or the ocean got involved in this. And we continue on, and we find an M and an A. But what he's likening this to is, if you've ever been in, this happens to be located in Texas naturally. And if you had come from Scotland, certainly you would look and you would see that Texas does look like a sea as far as being from horizon to horizon at times, whereby they wouldn't be used to that. So we will see the entire translation here. We notice that the longer lines, which two stem lines is G with an H, that will give you a G-A-C-H, which means all. Now let's go, if we may, to a full translation. I, Oneill, claim this field, 12th part of a plow land, 5 times over. It's big as the sea and all good. So he was very pleased with this particular area. And if you've ever been in that part of Texas, it does look like you just see over the horizon and the land just keeps going. It is a beautiful, beautiful sight. 2 times we have Oneill, and there you can see what I'm talking about, just like it goes on forever, from horizon to horizon, and to a Celt from the Isles of Scotland and Ireland. Certainly you can see why he would say, I love it, it's all good. And this was naturally located along a stream bed, which was a highway of that time. And those highways were freeways of that time, because with water always bringing game and fish and transportation, all one needed to explore at that time. So Oneill put his mark down here, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is not one of the earlier land claims in America. And it was done, he emphasized all with such huge strokes there on the stone that I feel he must have he must have been a person that really liked to express himself. And when we move around to this position, we have a stem line, a T above the stem line, and we have an L below. And what the word T-U-L, tull, means the projecting or the protruding part. Well, naturally, we go from, you can already imagine, and as much as he has tipped us off to a seasonal thing, that we have a notch. And when you're looking at markers that mark a solstice, spring, winter, sunset, sunrise, type calendar, you look for that notch, and this notch apparently has even been worked on a little bit. And as we continue to read, we have the projecting part, and we'll get you a better shot of it here in a moment. And it continues reading to that it will brightly appear or show, and show, it gives the location, and it states part of the shoulder, M-A-E-L, mel. And this is when you, from the cave inside looking out, you have a man's shoulder that appears here, giving you basically the clue to the direction in which you should look. And then the final letters here is an SL, that's 4 above the stem line and 2 below, which means a time sign or a confirmation. Okay, here you will note the shoulder. See the man's shoulder? And see the indentation where the neck is? This is no doubt where the sun will shine through. And then we see the N and the L, which is translated bright. And then we see M-L, M-A-E-L, part of the shoulder. S-L, S-E-L-A, which means confirmation, or is translated confirmation. And let's translate on the projecting part shaped like a shoulder, the bright light will confirm the time. And of course we know from the outside it's the winter season that it confirms. Oneill was pretty sharp, all right, put a lot of work in at this site. Ancient Irish ogham, found in the great state of Texas, on a river joining with the Rio Grande River. I repeat, a river joining, well, we'll say it, the Pecos. And just off the Pecos River, and we see that great land of Texas with one of its first land claims dating back to about 600 AD by a Celt by the name of Oneill. Travelers, early travelers in this great America. It documents our Father's Word, His scattering them, their travels. I think it's fantastic, and I sure want to thank the people of the area for allowing us to bring this to you. So we'll go to the back of the little shelter and see if we can confirm what it is that he's trying to point out. We're going to have in the top of this ceiling, we are looking out through the notch, so to speak, and if one were to place their head against the back of this wall, then you have marks above, which we'll insert here in a moment, that gives you the movements of whatever solstice it is that is coming into view, and it even gives you degrees, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 8 would give you the 7 signs of the season, and 8 for these people was probably new beginnings, the new year, whether it was civil, whether it was religious, or whether it was just a year from the Zuni calendar, whatever. I simply say that the sun watchers, or those that kept dates by the sun, were always accurate. The moons change, but the sun is always the same. You can count on it. It never changes, and it always gives the exact, as the Ogham declared, season or confirmation that winter was coming on or spring was here. I tend, in as much as the letter count meaning new beginnings in most all cultures, that we're talking about probably the spring. But at the same time, new beginnings for many people was the new year began in the fall. So interesting, very interesting. No doubt this shelter was utilized by people, not necessarily so much for living space, because there's living space galore. By that I mean in various types of houses, which we've witnessed through pits and so on and so forth, that there were dwellings by the Indians, would be their transportable shelters, their tents, teepees, and of course as we have square shelters, even as far north as Albuquerque, certainly for the Celts, the Iberians, and certainly the Hebrews that we found the Ten Commandments located in Los Lunas. So again, one of those interesting places. I think it's fascinating when we have something that is exact as a protrusion of a shoulder, and yet the word for part of the shoulder in Gaelic, etched in stone and protected from weather in a large part, declaring when we have something visual that we can see. It's almost like seeing a rebus, that we have proof basically of the writing itself, and this happens to be that type of writing. So again, the highways of that time were the waterways, and the Rio Grande opening into the Gulf of Mexico gave entrance to peoples from around the world that traveled at that time, and we know that many peoples traveled. And of course here it's absolute that it was Celts, because the language in modern times is called Gaelic. The word shoulder, the word sign, confirmation, and a season in ancient Ogham, and with your alignment marks, even as the weeks would grow closer to it with the rays, we have the solstice mark and the alignment. It would give them that perfect or the accurate date in this area, wherever they were or wherever they were from. Many people may think, well, that was ancient and people did not know. They navigated by the stars. They navigated using the sun, if you would. And there was a great deal of information and knowledge that certainly many people don't have at this day. That is to say, as far as travel is concerned or navigation, we spoil ourselves in this new generation in that we have GPSs, or we guide from satellites. Farmers use it to count off rows practically. We use it in aviation, and we're really spoiled that man used to, at that time, still had those fixed objects that they could align with or shoot. By that I mean for direction, time, season. Time, speed, and distance. That's what the traveler needs to know how far he's gone and which and where he has traveled. Certainly, they were wise enough to know those things, because the proof is in the pudding. We're in the great state of New Mexico. We're off of a tributary to the Rio Grande River, and the tributary being one that would lead into this area. And there you have it, ancient Celtic writings, pure and simple, with the pointing out those very common things in life that man needs to know. The exact date for planting, for travel, for hunting, maybe to move on north from this location if spring was coming, whereby it would be the climate would be much more hospitable at that time of the year. This gives that time and season. I think it's fascinating that we have these wonderful things throughout the southwest, the north, south, east, west, just all over this great nation, the travelers in ancient history. I always regret that the academic world finds so much, finds it very difficult that they can come to the conclusion that Columbus discovered America. Number one, it makes me uncomfortable, because when you say that Columbus discovered America, even in American history books, you simply taint the American Indian as non-existent. And they were here. They admit they were here. But to say Columbus discovered America, naturally, the ancestors of the American Indian and the Celts and Iberians and many others that we found their languages documented were here long before that. So certainly, when do we grow up? We've let one or two so-called great scholars in time fix dates as to when Columbus discovered America, and as far as pre-Columbian is concerned, it doesn't exist. We've let one or two scholars with a very narrow mind fix that. And I tell you this, we that are interested in the heritage of our people will not stop. We will continue documenting these actual facts, this data that proves that a person speaking that language was here during that time, and a trained eye can come pretty close to the age of these markings, and we can see signs of other peoples that have traveled through this same area even after 600 AD, 800 AD, when these travelers went through. And can you imagine? Can you really imagine in one little waterway, along one little waterway, for an anthropologist to have removed a skeletal remains that dates 9,000 years old. Think about it. That's a lot of history. And we're gonna start with Columbus. Let's face it. Let's get real. I would say to the academic world, get a life. Thank you. All right. I hope you enjoyed that little documentary from Texas. Fantastic. Now we're going to go to New Mexico. Not too awful many miles as the bird flies from where we were there in the great state of Texas, or New Mexico rather. We were in New Mexico. We're going deeper up into New Mexico at this time. And I won't give any more locations other than that. We're going to go with Gene Ballinger again, of who you're all familiar with. We're going to visit a ghost town. And what a ghost town this is. Do you know where it's very near? Victoria Park, which is to say, the great Apache war chief, near his home ground, his most favorite place in the States and old Mexico combined. And if you were to ever visit it, you would know what I mean. So, let's go to Ghost Town and see what we can find in the remains. And certainly, man always leaves signs and evidence of what happened in an area in past history. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are in New Mexico again, the land of enchantment. And certainly with this and the series that follows, as there will be a reenactment, if everything goes well, we're in that general basic area, and we're in a town. I'm going to let Gene Ballinger, who all of you are familiar with. Gene, thank you very much for having us back and being our host here. We appreciate it very much. Share with the folks, if you will.
All right. We're at a place that had a name of Danville. Danville was a mining town. Probably 650 to 700 people lived here at one time. Probably from 1881 until 1900. We're very close to Victoria's holy ground at this time, roughly 4 miles away. As you can see, it's very rugged country in high pine. We're going to walk through the remains of this town. Really isn't much here anymore, and it's very difficult to find some of the building remains. Others are fairly obvious. This town had a very interesting history because it was abandoned several times due to Apache attacks. It even had a doctor once, and what is left of the sutler's store is still here. There was never a cavalry unit stationed here, but they came through often. This location is roughly halfway between the town of Kingston and the town of Chloride in the Gila National Forest. This is on forest land. And our first meeting with Danville was in 1971. At that time, some of the buildings were still up. And we can take a walk now, and we'll kind of walk you through Danville. This building, as best we can determine, was probably the store. It has the largest frame left as far as actual size. When we were first here in 1971, this was still roughly 4 logs high. And our first introduction to 2 green rattlesnakes was right here at this spot. This building, as time shows, will in a few more years just be gone. And if we can preserve it now, at least people will realize what it once looked like. If it were complete, then of course we'd be back well over 100 years. But as far as we can determine, this was the store and took care of things. Most of these buildings were in the dirt. They were dugouts with tents, and the only primary buildings like this were actually constructed. A lot of them were made of stone, but the miners themselves lived in dugouts, and sometimes they had tents, sometimes they had tarpaulins. things of that nature. Two things that have never been located here by archaeologists or anybody else. One, the cemetery has never been found. And two, the dump has never been found. Weather, maybe a slide or something, just simply obliterated them as far as we can tell. Now we'll go on down the way to the only building that's almost still up out of the three wood structures that we've been able to locate. This is the best preserved of what's left of the buildings here at Danville. Danville was a silver mining town, and I believe we'll also be stopping at what remains of a little town called Gold Dust, which was just the opposite. They were a gold mining town, and we'll probably be stopping there today too. We don't know what this building was, but there was actually three. This log building, then what's left of the foundation of a stone building, and then another log building. We have no idea what they were. And these, in 1971, this was almost all up, and there was still some roof. Most of it's down, and we believe that some of it was just simply taken and used for firewood. That's all we can guess. But these too will be gone in a not too distant future, and it's, I believe, very fortunate that Dr. Murray is recording these for the record, so that down the line our children and children's children will at least know that these places did exist, and that they were of such great importance to the building of our country. Silver was a major metal at that time, and it created thousands of jobs. This was also the area of many Apache minor cavalry battle and skirmish situations. Danville got people evacuated several times, 3 times that we know of. And down the road are what's left of some miners' cabins, and there is a reference that they came into Danville hoping to have some help, and there wasn't anybody here. They'd already got out. But this is the building remains. We'll go on down the way now. They had actually built a protective wall. Some of it is still up, and at one time there were still some shell casings could be found on the inside of the wall, and interesting enough, arrowheads on the outside of the wall, which kind of tells its own story.
You want to say something about those artifacts?
These apparently are purple glass, some kind of strapping. This would be probably a broken cup or a broken piece of dishware. Hard to tell what that is. That looks like definitely an old beer bottle. And but this sort of thing is found scattered everywhere in a location like this. It's just a reminder that once upon a time in this now wilderness, there were a lot of people and a lot of activity. Arnold is pretty much determined that we have determined that this was was the blacksmith shop, primarily because there was shoes, new and used, ox shoes, which you don't find too much of, horseshoes, mule shoes, nails, that sort of thing, all scattered in this area, and we took photographs of them and recorded them back as early as '71, and they're probably still here. But this is all that's left, and it was a rock building. Now just below us is where the defensive wall is, or what's left of it, that was obviously used during battle. We're at what's left of what has always been felt was a defensive wall that probably completely encircled Danville at one time. When we first saw this wall, and I hate to refer all the time back, but it just shows you what time does. This wall in many places was this high. And now, 25, 26 years later, you can see that it's diminished to just a line of stones. Some of these clearly have been taken away and used for fire pits by people that were camping, things like that. There were shell casings found on this side, which would be the inner area of the wall, and on the outer side were found arrowheads, which seem to tell the story that at least one battle was fought here, and we know that there were more than that. They were more skirmishes with several of the Apaches coming in, usually to get horses, and then the miners holding them off unless they took off. Right behind us are the remains of two more stone buildings. We have no idea what they may have been.
And as he pans here, Gene, this is more of the wall back here, isn't it?
Yes, sir, it is.
And they had quite a defensive mechanism set up here for such a small town. Of course, they had to.
Yes, they did. And up above us, you can see there's one of the mines, right straight up the hill. You can see the stone where it's tailings, yeah,
the tailings.
Pretty high, yeah.
And this was silver.
This was silver, yes. This was silver, and it's a belt that kind of runs from Kingston to Chloride.
Well, you know, Gene, this is certainly beautiful country. You don't expect this type vegetation in the center in New Mexico necessarily.
No.
You know, at huge pines and this sort of thing.
Well, people tend to think that the Southwest is all desert, when truth of the matter is there's a little bit of desert in a whole lot of this country.
Absolutely. It's beautiful, it really is, and I must say I'm so proud of you for being the CEO of Southwestern Ventures that gives the average person an opportunity to see some of the country. We owe you a great debt of gratitude for that.
Well, we're just trying to preserve and allow people the opportunity. As you know, that road coming in today, you're not going to do in a sports car.
That's right. That's true.
But people need to know what our heritage is and their forefathers. And slowly but surely, nature is reclaiming places like this. And it's with our deepest gratitude that you record it for posterity so that people do know and can see it firsthand.
Well, to me, I think it tells our people so much that when you look at the way that our ancestors lived, you shouldn't get too upset when the automatic dishwasher goes haywire.
No, these people were rugged, and it's misunderstood often. They try to make out that the Indians were bad. This was the Indians' home, and our ancestors, were invading their home. And the cavalry had to come in, and the dragoons had to come in to defend and protect the miners, when in fact they're right in the middle of the Apaches' home ground.
Right.
And so both entities need to be recognized that this was their place, their home.
Yes. And, you know, the Apache, as an example, we'll take Victoria. It's no wonder that he picked this area.
Oh.
It's obvious why he would pick this area. It's really a garden in the middle of the desert. And
well, we have a running stream right behind us. Plenty of game. The whole country is beautiful, and this was the very heart of Victoria's peoples, the Warm Spring Apache. This was their home, and they were driven from their home. So, like any of us, we're going to fight for
our home. That's right.
That's right, and our children and our families.
Right. That's the stability of a people, is the home, and if you can't defend that, well, you don't deserve a home anyway, and certainly they felt they did.
Oh, yes.
The side always certainly has both sides always make the story, do they?
Yes, sir. And thanks to you, both sides get told.
Well, that's as it should be. We need truth is what we need in our history, and we can take all the more pride in our heritage. And it gives our young people something to look back upon and see what the freedom that we have in this great nation has cost. Has it pained some people? Yes, it has. Has it grown others? Well, yes. But it can make us also more or less appreciate the harmony and the difference in the peoples, and respect their rights and their culture.
Well, Dr. Murray, we have this land is just beautiful, and at the time of the Apache and earlier man, they appreciated and lived with nature. When the immigrants came, and then the miners, they were, as were the Spanish. The Spanish were hated enemies of many Indian tribes, not just the Apache, because they were exploiting and naming the name of the church in the name of gold, whatever. We're guilty of the same thing.
Absolutely.
They came in and they were exploiting, in this case, silver. It was part of the Manifest Destiny program to expand the United States, and as a result, of course, the Apaches were displaced from their home, and this was part of their home, and it created a war. But people need to know these places exist, and we also need to know that they must be protected and preserved.
Yes, never take from a wall of defense and build a place to build a fire. Find your own stones out in the hills that were not part of our heritage. And I must say, of all places, some of the high country in New Mexico, you see the least of graffiti, but still some. Keep your graffiti to yourself, that is to say initials and so forth, especially if you're in an area where history is recorded there in what's on the ground. The rocks speak, the artifacts speak, the broken pottery speaks, the beer bottle speaks. It lets us know the culture, and from those tidbits we're able to gain that knowledge and preserve it in video or writing, whatever the case may be. Gene has certainly written some very interesting articles on the Southwest, and I appreciate him for that.
Well, thank you, Arnold. We can go to a well-known grave site now that has an interesting history. Someone, and nobody in this country, and I guess maybe I know most folks who live in this part of the country, no one knows who puts the plastic flowers on that grave.
Wow.
And the date, I believe it's 1881, whoever it was, and there's a story about who is buried there, but someone puts flowers on that grave every year, and it's a big mystery. Nobody knows who, but we'll be going there next.
Great. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Gene.
Yes, sir. Well, Arnold, this is the remains of the Gold Dust Cemetery. As you can see, the country is considerably different, but we're only about 15 miles from Danville.
Wow.
And we're out of the mountains proper, and the forest, and out on the flats. Gold Dust had probably at its peak 500 people. The main town, of course, was Hillsboro, and of course Hillsboro's still there. Gold Dust is gone. This is the cemetery at Gold Dust, and I don't know as anyone today knows who is buried here. We know there's military, we know that there's civilian, miners, children from illness. That's about it. And as you can tell, as we go through, everything's in ruins. The cemetery itself, I believe this is on Bureau of Land Management land. You can see a pack rat has made his home here. Some of these headstones have initials on them. One we noted has a cross.
Cross,
yes. The you really don't know when you're walking on or around them, so have to kind of be careful. At one time they had, most of them had something around them, fence or something, and it's just gone. Just right down the road here, the last two remaining buildings from gold dust. At one point in time, this area, immediate area that we're in for perhaps 3 miles, was the highest gold producing area in the United States. And it still produces gold. Most of this is still claimed. The mining areas are.
I make it that there's, now that I've seen some more, I didn't even count 30 plus graves in this cemetery.
I would not be the least bit surprised. I believe there might be some old timers still alive. This town, this community flourished starting about 1881, 1882. This was laying on the ground back there. It's a part of a plate, and it says Meyer, China, established 1881.
1881.
And so we'll just place it back where it came from. And this is, in my heart, I find it hard to imagine and understand why such places are left as they are. It's very much like we have a military fort over here several miles. It's about gone, but the fort itself's on private property. The graveyard is on public land. The fort's still partially standing. The graveyard's completely, except for the wall, completely gone, worse than this one is. That part I don't understand either. This seems to be the only complete grave left that has anything around it. Someone cared enough to put up an iron spacing around it. It's been here a long time, well over 100 years. And the history here is no different than it is at Danville. The difference is Danville was producing silver and gold dust was producing gold. All of the gold here is placer, was and is, and it's not the producer, of course, as it was then, and they're just mostly small miners, small claims. But it's definitely part of our history.
It certainly is, and it makes you wonder. These grave we passed on the road where the flowers are placed, and I noticed a teddy bear there.
Yes, sir.
And it's got to be an ancient grave, so someone still cares. And
well, that had we had the opportunity to read the headstone, that man, the party there was a tent saloon about 1882, right across the road from that, and they were gambling. And as the story goes, that man was shot, and so they just buried him across the trail, and and they've got his name inscribed on the stone, and when he was shot and killed, and it was well over 100 years ago, but somebody puts the flowers on and the teddy bear. Who knows? No one knows. Nobody in the area knows.
I think that's remarkable. I really do. That who knows, a family member or some compassionate soul, but it is too bad in our nation that some of our cemeteries run down to this state, and it is, they were builders of this nation.
Yes, sir.
And no doubt much of the gold that was in Fort Knox, and as much as this was such a large producer, came from this area.
I can't remember the figures anymore, but it's the hundreds of thousands of ounces that was recovered.
Well,
and by this was all placer gold. It was all dug out of the sand and washed with water and separated. But we'll go down to one of the buildings still up is the old assayer's office.
Well, great.
And if we had everything that's gone through that assay office, we would never have to work again.
Well, well, you know, there is one thing we know, that as it's written, and I'll quote
of Scripture, to be absent from the body is present with the Father. Though it's unmarked, we know our Father knows who's where and what, and that they are with Him. And we certainly, it lets you know the history and the time that has passed as we look at the remains of a town and its citizens.
Yes.
Well, let's have a look then at the assay office.
All right, sir, we will. Well, we're at what is left of the assay office at Gold Dust. This whole building probably has had other squatters in it up to maybe the 1920s or 30s, and there were also some people used it for a time up into maybe the 50s. As you can see, it's native stone, and on the inside it had adobe plaster. The firehouse, or the place where they did the actual assay work, the meltdown and the tests, is in a adjoining stone structure, another stone structure just to my left. There are only two buildings left now in Gold Dust. This one and another one that's just below the hill here. This stream right below me was one of the high producers during the time period, and the amount of gold that has been taken out of here is just tremendous. The silence that is here today doesn't tell us of all the activity that went on back in those times. And hopefully, by having this recorded and preserved, one of these days this building also will be gone. But we do have a record of it now.
Well, Gene, thank you very much for having us back again.
Happy to do so, Arnold.
And we're looking forward to the dedication of Victoria's Park, where we can add to that history of both the Calvary and the Apache, the Native American Indian, and give due honors to both peoples there.
Yes.
As we go into this time. So we look forward to, hope we get to do it next month. And
well, we're sure going to try to.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, sir.